Before we dive in, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss out. Alright, let's jump into the clip.
Dame Harriet Baldwin, MP.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Chancellor, you've made it clear already in today's evidence how much you value the work of the Office for Budget Responsibility, the IMF and the independent economists who helped sort of frame the UK guardrails effectively. And I note that in their Article 4 examination of the UK economy last year, which was published on the 1st of July, the IMF said this about the UK economy. It said, growth is recovering faster than expected, inflation has fallen rapidly to target. And then you became Chancellor on the 5th of July, and the budget came out at the end of October. And I was very struck by the difference between the report that the Office for Budget Responsibility put out last October and the one that was published last week with your spring statement. In those 5 months, their forecast for inflation this year has gone from 2.6% to 3.2%. Obviously, you highlighted the fact that their growth forecast has halved from 2% to 1%. They're also expecting UK borrowing, to be £47.5 billion higher in the forecast period. They're expecting unemployment to go from 4.1% to 4.5%, despite the welfare reforms that were announced alongside the spring statement. They're expecting debt interest to be over 30 billion higher over the next 5 years. They're expecting, at the end of the forecast period, for there to be more children in poverty than in their last report. This is also awful April. Bills are going up for households across the country. We've got tariffs that are no doubt being announced later today. I just wondered to what extent you recognise now that business confidence and consumer confidence took a real hit after your budget in October.
Well, you started by talking about the IMF, and the IMF were very supportive of what we did in the budget last year to put the public finances back on a firm footing, and they were also very supportive of the fiscal rules that we announced, both to bring stability to the public finances but also to unlock private investment. So I was very appreciative of the support both from Kristalina Georgieva and Gita Gopinath at the IMF for the work that we are doing to bring stability back to the economy, and through our modern supply side approach to bring growth back. And you mentioned the OBR forecasts around growth for this year. Well, as you will well know, the OECD and others have downgraded a range of countries in the G7 and the developed world. But the OBR have also revised up growth in 2026, 2027, 28 and 29, and they forecast that by the end of the forecast period the economy will be bigger than they forecast the Conservatives' last budget, and indeed bigger than they forecast the budget that I delivered last autumn. So if you take it in the round, the OBR are saying the economy will be bigger. They put that down to the planning reforms that we've instigated, and the IMF have welcomed what we did at the budget last year.
But Chancellor, the IMF, as you rightly say, you are following a lot of the recommendations in their Article 4 report on the UK economy. You must acknowledge, you cannot deny the reality that since October last year and the spring statement, growth in this economy, the confidence of businesses, the confidence of consumers has been considerably worse than you were hoping for when you announced that budget. I mean, you must be able to see that.
Well, I absolutely accept that there are costs of any policy, whether it's on spending or tax, but there are also costs of irresponsibility. And just imagine if last October I hadn't have taken the action that we did to put the public finances on a firm footing, to put more money into the NHS, which has seen for 5 months in a row NHS waiting lists fall and 2 million additional appointments in the National Health Service, reducing those record waiting lists that were bequeathed to us by the previous government, but also because we've brought stability back to the economy. When the world changed, as it undoubtedly has these last few months, we were able to uplift the spending we put into defence to take it to 2.5% of GDP within just 2 years, the biggest sustained increase in defence spending.
Away money from the international development budget.
Yes, but if we hadn't have made those decisions last October in the budget, there would have been other demands on those budgets. So, you say only by doing that, I'm afraid your party had 14 years to put more money into defence, and
I'm
that money fell on
genuinely
defence
interested
spending.
in the decisions you have taken
Yes.
since you've become Chancellor. And what I'm not hearing is, in terms of these economic statistics since your budget last October, is anything that has got better in terms of these economic numbers. In fact, in your Treasury own document, in terms of the measures, and you cited the planning reforms as being a helpful supply side that have helped the Office for Budget Responsibility increase the growth of the UK economy. But in your chart 1.1 in the Treasury document published alongside the spring statement, it specifically spells out that the autumn budget measures in terms of crowding out and employer national insurance have actually reduced the UK economy. Surely you can accept that it's your measures that have had some of this impact in terms of the deteriorating statistics that I've mentioned since October. Chancellor.
So I've said that, of course, there are always costs to any policy on tax or spending, but there is also a cost of the counterfactual. And the counterfactual would have been leaving the public finances on an unfirm footing, to embed the instability that was bequeathed to us by the previous government, and it would also have meant further increases in NHS hospital waiting lists. So we increased national insurance contributions, and we put £25 billion extra investment into our National Health Service. We think that was the right priority. Now, other people would say, no, don't put more money into the NHS, and that is absolutely their right to say that. If you want more money into our NHS to reduce waiting times, and we have now for 5 months reduced NHS waiting lists with 2 million additional appointments, if you would prefer not to put that money into the NHS, you're absolutely at liberty to say that, but you have to be honest, because if you want that extra money, you have to support the taxes to pay for it.
Well, we can monitor the impact of that as time goes by, but in terms of the number that you just cited to this committee, which was the £500 a year extra in real household disposable income, could you just help the committee out, because I wondered which official document that's actually published in?
Well, it's from the OBR numbers, and I already have given that answer to Yuan Yang. So if you take the spring budget from the previous Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, and you look at the OBR's forecasts for real household disposable income in that forecast, and you compare it to the forecast that they published last week, and you look at RHDI per year, every year, and you look at the contrast between those two,
so it's
you average
£500 per year per household.
As I already have said in the previous answer, it is the average. So some years it's more than 500, some years it's less. 500 is the average additional RHDI for the spring statement I delivered last week compared to the last budget that the Conservatives delivered. And in that time, the OBR forecast that on average RHDI per person will be £500 more now because of the actions we've taken compared to the plans bequeathed to me by the previous government.
And the deterioration in terms of the economic statistics and the OBR's forecast since last October until now, March, do you recognise that has caused some consternation in terms of the way that the markets have dealt with the amount of gilts that the UK has to issue, and that it has put us much more, and the Office for Budget Responsibility confirmed this, much more at the mercy of the markets because we have increased the borrowing by the amounts that I read out earlier?
Well, the Office of Budget Responsibility say that 3/4 of the deterioration in the fiscal position since the budget last year was to do with movements in government bond yields. And you'll know that our bond yields have moved in line with our European peers.
They said a bit worse, actually.
Well, actually, if you look at us compared to Germany and France, I think it's we've moved in line with our peers, and that is what the Office of Budget Responsibility confirm. But look, when I became Chancellor, national debt as a share, national debt was twice as high as when Labour left office in 2010. And as a result of that, we are spending £105.3 billion on debt interest payments. That's more, let me finish answering your question. That's more than we spend on defence, the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice combined. That's why it's absolutely essential that we have returned fiscal stability to the economy and are beginning to, as the OBR confirm, bring down debt, public sector net financial liabilities as a share of GDP. It is essential that we do that, because I would rather spend money on the priorities of the British people rather than on servicing the debt left to us by the previous government.
But you have increased debt. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think, we just should acknowledge there was a pandemic in the middle of the last Parliament, whichever party was in power.
And a mini budget that crushed the economy.
Well, indeed,
both of those things.
But I think that the pandemic would have hurt everyone, so it's just to...
Before you head out, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video to help it reach even more awesome people like you. And hey, drop your thoughts in the comments, we'd love to hear from you.